High above the city, a tense standoff played out in a glass room while a pink-haired coworker pressed her face against the window, desperate for the gossip. Her dark-haired colleague whispered a cruel secret that Xiaoi's girlfriend had come to break his heart. A pink-haired girl gasped in shock at the absurdity of a nuclear breakup bomb dropped right at work, muttering that the girl was absolutely savage. While inside the soundproof room, her icy ex glared at Xiao Hai and spat that being tied to a pathetic loser was suffocating, leaving him completely paralyzed by her venomous words that called his existence sickening and revealed she'd only dated him because she thought he had hidden cultivation talent, even though his legendary bloodline was dead and he had wasted 3 months of her prime time. Hey, she slumped under his intense aura as he softly reminded her that he'd spent every last saving of his life on premium spirit stones and rare artifacts, only for her to shriek that they were trash compared to the divine earring the rich young master gave her, which could banish curses, shield her, and make her look amazing. Outside, the pink-haired coworker was so mad she literally smashed her plastic mouse. A loud crack made the X spin around, but the pink-haired girl ignored it and shouted through the glass, scolding the gold digger for crossing the line while her dark-haired friend panicked and pulled her back, hissing a warning that their cultivation department's low targets meant getting tangled in drama was career suicide, causing Hai to harden his expression and drop his nice guy act inside. The poisonous X turned her eyes back toward her. He coldly ordered every single item to be handed back. Pure rage burst inside her, and she threw herself out of the chair, shaking like a bomb about to explode. She let loose a deadly curse, condemning him to die a screaming failure and rot away. She stormed out like a hurricane, and Hay just shouted from the hallway that they should just ship the loot if it's too heavy to carry. Hay shouted back to ask for the exact coordinates, refusing to let any good gear go to waste, while the pink-haired girl stared at him with instant fascination until her colleague slapped her arm and hissed at her to stop, because one more second of slacking off would have their demon manager jumping out to scare them. Speaking of the devil, a cold voice crawled up their spines and demanded answers from Zhongxian, the ruthless cultivation boss, who immediately grilled her about her monthly quotas before her sharp-eyed associate Zixian locked onto Hay, who was slumped over. The pink-haired girl leaped to his rescue, explaining he had just survived a brutal dumping and only needed a moment to recover his sanity. Xian's eyes grew dark, but he kept quiet, and then time jumped to sunset, where Hay hung his legs over the edge of a towering rooftop. About lunch made him jump, and he spun around to see Xian stepping out of the shadows to ask if his broken heart still hurt. The manager threw a cold soda at him. He caught the drink with a shocked laugh, realizing the old tyrant had finally softened up, and as he took a bold gulp, a dizzying wave hit him so hard he stumbled up and roared at the sky, screaming about the leech who stole his money and stabbed his soul, demanding that her karma come rushing down. Genting felt amazing, and he managed to slur out a real thank you, shocked that his icy boss actually cared for his struggling team, but the relief vanished instantly as the world violently spun out of control. A terrifying realization hit him that the drink was spiked, and as he dropped the can, the polished aluminum reflected Zishan's twisted demonic smirk before darkness swallowed Hay completely as he hit the concrete. Hours slipped away while a throbbing headache screamed inside his head until he forced his eyes open to see heavy iron chains binding him to a rough cliff face. Footsteps echoed through the gloom as Zixian loomed above him like a predator, and in a panic, he begged to know if this was some twisted mistake, only for the manager to try to reveal his dark plan before Hay instantly killed the mood by shouting he was not into freaky kink stuff, which earned him a brutal punch that finally shut him up. Jin, fed up with Hay's boring jokes, yanked his hair to force him to look down at the scary drop below. Deep inside the pitch-black chasm, two glowing monster eyes snapped open as the giant shadow rose to reveal a legendary and terrifying dragon. Zixian bowed and offered Hay to the great dragon lord, promising that even though he was just an unawakened nobody, his flesh held a rare ancient power that made him 1,000 times tastier than normal livestock. So the happy beast tossed over the legendary pill they had agreed on before Zixian vanished to break through his limits. Left behind, Hay froze in terror as the divine dragon suddenly spoke to him, yet facing certain death, he locked eyes with the beast and stood his ground. His last words were, "Bro, your breath smells terrible." So the dragon was so mad it roared about being the Sky Lord who rules all the clouds, thunder and rain, boasting of its ancient training and long rule before suddenly feeling too embarrassed to show off to a normal person. Snatching Hay up, the monster abandoned its quick bite for a slow, painful grind, which made Hay scream in protest, only for the beast to mock his late begging before Hay deadpanned that his raging athlete's foot would ruin the dragon's mouth forever with its stench, making it taste like waking up next to toxic gym socks. Furious, the dragon barked that he shut his beak, but as the beast's giant jaws snapped down, they crushed half his body while he casually grumbled about a mere pinch, even though his shaking face showed he was in terrible pain. As he tumbled into the beast's throat, a glowing mark on his severed hand woke up his forbidden power, linking his life and death to his enemy so that any pain he felt was mirrored back at him. His broken body healed endlessly as long as he survived, and if he ever died, both souls would be erased forever, unless a god stepped in, until a grumpy teacher's voice snapped him back to reality, where he found himself sitting in a normal classroom. He was meant to share 7 ancient secrets, but instead he went wild talking about band magic and dying together until the teacher thought he had taken too much medicine and started seeing things, causing the whole room to laugh at him. Back in the staff lounge, a teacher asked Professor Yin about his new student, assuming the kid must have some crazy godlike power since no elite professor would take him otherwise. But Yin just smirked and admitted his true secret was a huge bribe. He knew the student would surely fail the first test, so taking the easy money was a no-brainer. Back in class, his classmates mocked him as a joke, laughing until their sides hurt, but Hei just sat there ignoring them all, while quietly wondering what amazing power the heavens had finally given him. Immediately after the legendary dragon swallowed him, he woke up in bed to find his spiritual root, which had been dead for 20 years, suddenly sparking back to life. The cruel words of his toxic ex kept echoing in his mind, constantly reminding him that he was the last pathetic heir of a failed cultivation family. Suddenly, there was a loud thud as a heavy boot slammed down on his desk. An arrogant bully tried to act tough and force others to bow down, demanding a weekly payment of special pills and potions, while the other students watched in awe as he humiliated a new victim for their entertainment. Hei looked up calmly and asked why he had to pay and why that clown's dirty shoe was standing on his land. Jinju smirked, boasting that he owns the land and can leap out this window like a pro, never taking the stairs like a regular newbie. Before leaving, the bully screamed at Hei that if he didn't hand over the goods by sunset, he would be tied to the lamppost at the academy's front door for everyone to see and beat up. Just as the boastful bully began to climb out his window, a wild thought struck our hero, and without a second's delay, he smashed the bully's leg. The tyrant fell hard from the sky, landing face first on the concrete in a moment of pure cinematic perfection. The whole classroom went silent in shock as everyone pressed against the window, knowing the bully's dramatic dive was harmless since they had trained their bodies to be like steel, though some secretly cheered for his failure to improve their grades, only for the defeated boy to rise and vow to break Hei's legs, prompting a nervous green-haired classmate to warn Hei that he was already beaten because the bully was a legendary undefeated hunter from a powerful elite family, whose rivals once watched their entire families destroyed, so Hei had no choice but to head toward the dangerous Guji Alley where the bully loved to hunt his victims in the dark. Scary bad guys stood in the way of his journey home. The bald brute spun around. Their jaws dropped in shock as this crazy guy walked right into their trap, showing no fear at all while they wondered if he was hiding a secret power, so he shouted back at their cowardice for dragging him to this bad spot and challenged them to fight. A hot-tempered helper lost his cool and unleashed a fierce kick. Hei crashed down onto the concrete, making a huge hole in the ground. The thugs blinked in shock, realizing all their big talk had led to nothing. Bai chuckled to himself, seeing that the kid was just easy prey. As Hei fell with blood running from his bruised face, the arrogant thug stomped over him, boasting that his punch carried the crushing power of the fifth body refinement tier before sneering. "Your organs are like mashed potatoes, kid. You're practically dead." Through bloody teeth, Hei forced a wicked smirk, felt nothing at all, and laughed at the weak tap you called a fifth refinement, noting that blow was softer than a pathetic basement dweller, draining his energy every night. The thug's weak pride broke instantly, and a fierce anger took over him. He brought his foot down hard, aiming to crush Hei's head. Crimson suddenly sprayed everywhere, freezing the goon in shock. Jubai and the bald lackey stared in pure terror as a severed leg flew right past them. The bully crashed down, screaming in pure pain. The bully erupted from where his arm used to be as Hei laughed with terrifying delight. Suddenly a strange woman appeared right out of nowhere. She held her own battered friend, Hei, as a shield. But a sudden cold shiver raced down Jubai's spine just as the bald brute seized the chance while she was turned away and lunged forward. Jubai screamed in terror, begging to stop because one deadly blow could wipe out the whole block. But the fool didn't care, charging forward with his final move, a deadly blow from the purple gold club. A huge shockwave exploded and destroyed the whole neighborhood, so he silently hoped his dad wouldn't make him stay inside because of all the damage. But slowly, the heavy dust cloud began to fade away. The bald attacker stopped dead in his tracks, unable to believe what he was seeing. Jubai's eyes looked like they were trying to jump right out of his head. The deadly weapon hit her head, but she didn't even flinch. Just a moment ago, up on a grand floating island above the clouds, a beautiful silver-haired god and a mystical white crane were having a casual game of Chinese checkers. Bird bowed to the woman and called her Lord Divine Dragon, asking why it would ever stay in human form. It chirped. The Dragon Queen sneered at the gold and cursed the broken rules of their immortal palace before mocking the thought of ever shrinking back into a ridiculous, goofy little human shape. The crane gasped in anger. She smirked and asked if it was crazy, but he replied that her nose was bleeding, causing the crane to panic. She laughed it off, confident her body had stayed unblemished for over a century, but then a terrifying red river rushed down her face as the crane shrieked, while the bleeding grew violently worse. She quickly used a healing spell to steady herself, then immediately dove toward the mortal world, ignoring the bird's desperate calls for help, blasting through the sky with a cursed seal burning on her palm that revealed an unbreakable death hex she couldn't break even with her godlike power, forcing her to realize this twisted magic was tied to a fragile human she had to save right away. Instantly back in the alley, a glowing energy barrier pulsed. Ancient runes glowing on the concrete walls sealed off the fight zone, leaving Jubai completely mesmerized as she effortlessly took a brutal hit from a top-tier expert, instantly creating an impenetrable shield in a split second to protect every building from the blast, proving she was on a completely different level. The Divine Dragon side is winning by a lot, since I haven't seen such weak trash in centuries, and I've forgotten how frail you mortals are, even weaker than a newborn cultivator. Jubai screamed at his minion to run, but before the bald thug could even blink, his body blew up into a cloud of bloody mist. Jubai froze in pure terror as his knees gave way, sending him crashing to the dirt while blind panic consumed him as the terrifying shadow of the dragon, who had just returned from being his snack, loomed closer to kill him, only for him to shrug it off with clueless confidence and earn a brutal beating that shook the ground itself. She screamed at him to break the spell, and Jubai shivered from a distance as she unleashed her terrifying fury, even on her own team. Suddenly, bright red blood spurted from her mouth, splashing onto the broken ground, and she realized with horror that hurting him was hurting her, so she had to stop fighting to run and find a way to fix them both. But he boldly ordered her to stop as she watched him miraculously come back to life, silently cursing this broken cheat skill, while he smoothly demanded heavy compensation for being treated like a casual snack. No one had ever dared to speak out of turn to her, yet she hissed in response to his shameless demand for eternal life. Pure irritation flashed across her face as she challenged his boldness, but without missing a beat, he dropped a threat about diving into boiling acid to respawn forever, while forcing her to share every ounce of his torture. Blazing fury consumed her as she debated trapping the disrespectful brat in unbreakable ice while she researched a cure, knowing our guy had already predicted this icy fate and dared her to try it. Her fury erupted into a swirl of dark crimson hellfire as she aggressively tossed a manual at his face, smashing his insane claim of instant immortality to reveal it was just a boring guide for slow progress, brutally exposing his lack of talent while promising that mastering it would only buy him a top academy spot and endless riches. Reading the golden title Advanced Payment of Skills, he knew he'd struck absolute gold and smirked at how leveling his aura was the ultimate move, only for her to mock his foolishness in her head while planning to brutally exploit him until his curse broke, not realizing he was secretly plotting the exact same revenge. Meanwhile, a terrified Jubai clung to the rubble in a desperate hiding spot, but her sharp, hungry eyes instantly found him. Though he squeezed his eyes shut to accept his doom, the dragon coldly scoffed at wasting her power on such a small target, insisting instead on a total wipe of his memory. A sudden dazzling burst of her aura swallowed him whole, and he screamed in terror. He jolted awake from his dream as the screaming instructor yelled for him to calm down, leaving him standing confused in the testing arena with no memory of yesterday and no idea what to do next. The loud instructor shouted about the month's first brutal test, challenging everyone to push their limits because the weakest students would be thrown out of the academy without a second thought. With that grim warning, the brutal physical exams began, screaming at them to fight for their future. He ordered the attack, and our guy was caught off guard by a week 1 surprise trial since the lazy teachers had barely taught any skills, so a green-haired classmate leaned over to remind him that this is the brutal senior year where everyone else had been grinding private tutoring for 2 years to survive. With zero idea what was going on, he listened in horror as his classmate talked about the crazy pressure of final year, where it was all about surviving fake exams, climbing the social ladder, and chasing fame. And in that moment of panic, he realized he had missed every single study session and was absolutely doomed to fail. Beside him, someone whispered to a heavyset kid about an upcoming ranking change, and when asked, the green-haired student viciously claimed that the clueless new transfer student was about to hit rock bottom because skipping essential prep courses meant instant failure. The two erupted in cruel laughter until the green-haired student noticed Jubai, whispering in shock that even this fierce class bully spared the new arrival, while Jubai himself was just as baffled as the brutal armor-piercing trials began, raising a massive magical wall just as the instructor confidently called on him for a legendary display of raw power. Jubai punched so hard it smashed through 5 thick layers of magical concrete, sending a shockwave that left the ecstatic teacher screaming his name, while the crowd went wild, though G just brushed it off with a hidden worry, while the green-haired guy stared in shock and called him a campus legend. He said the test only counts how many wall layers you smash, ignoring your training type, and while most students barely break 2 or 3, smashing 5 so early is a record. So next it was Wu's turn, and the chubby guy from before stepped up to throw his sphere. It crashed into the first barrier and got stuck right away. He begged the sky for a miracle, and just like that, the crack appeared, sending him into a wild celebration. Then the proctor finally called out our transfer student, even though the instructor was secretly furious that the principal dumped this dead weight into his elite class. As he shouted, "Hey, come forward," green Greenhair thought our boy was totally cooked because failing to shatter even a single layer meant instant expulsion. So while he wished Hei the best and saw him step up empty-handed, the teacher sneered and roasted him, joking that their class suddenly birthed a magical genius who creates weapons out of thin air, which caused the whole room to burst into mocking laughter, with Jibai sarcastically adding that a hidden dragon like him would definitely guarantee the teacher's promotion. But right then, crackling energy formed a solid sphere right in Hei's palm. He relaxed his stance, ready to throw. He twisted his arm and threw it, turning the flying object into a blur that smashed through the shields like dust, leaving the instructor so scared he thought the whole school might fall down. But just at the very last layer, the energy gently fizzled away. The teacher breathed out a huge sigh of relief as the dangerous energy finally calmed down, yet that wild hit had already smashed the entire senior class record, and since he'd never seen such a brutal lightning strike before, he knew Hei's hidden strength was off the charts, marking the boy with a dual mastery of body and chi as a true monster destined to challenge heaven itself. Suddenly the fangirls swarmed Hei, absolutely shocked by his incredible new look, and swooning over him, with one girl screaming that his raw talent rivaled the best prodigies, while others convinced themselves he must belong to a terrifying hidden sect. Meanwhile, the green-haired guy realized he was in deep trouble after laughing loudly just minutes ago, and is now sweating bullets, only for Hei to catch his panicked face and demand an explanation before the green-haired man frantically apologized for his blindness and swore absolute loyalty. But Hei simply flashed a peace sign and vanished in a blink. Greenhair stood frozen in shock as Hei sprinted toward the train station, suddenly realizing that the strongest beasts always work much harder than normal people. Hei was sprinting for his life as pure annoyance burned through his veins, finally realizing a toxic dragon had plotted against him by slipping him a literal ticking time bomb of a trash manual that forced him to master a deadly lightning technique before the brutal countdown ran out, which would otherwise crush him, drain his power and decay his bloodline forever. So as he frantically tore through his bookshelves for the ancient text he'd previously bought and ignored, he realized ordering a new copy was too slow, and he had no choice but to instantly download the digital version to survive. His jaw dropped in shock at the crazy price, while the neighbors downstairs pounded on the ceiling, shouting that they needed sleep for their morning grind tomorrow. When he first bought this cursed manual, it wiped out his entire savings because inflation made the price jump so high that he was left horrified. He stared at his screen as the doom clock ticked down to 8 hours while the Reaper knocked, forcing him to spend his last 3,000 on a 200,000 price tag to save his life before vanishing into the mountains to grind and ignite his spiritual core with only 3 hours left. He spent the last 60 minutes pouring himself into intense fighting moves. Boom! Explosions shook the quiet woods, carving huge holes right through old trees and big rocks with his raw strength. Sweat dripping down his face, he managed to lock in his cultivation sequence right as the death clock hit 32 seconds left. With a smug grin, he wiped his brow and laughed, calling the brutal trial a total cakewalk. The world twisted wildly until all was dark. High above, on the mystical floating island, there is a hidden bathhouse waiting to be discovered. The air was so full of thick steam that you could barely see through it. The divine dragon was happily soaking in the clear water when crimson blood suddenly erupted from her back, turning the pristine pool red. She shouted in anger at the sky, heartbroken because she had just lost the rare immortal dew she worked so hard to make. Peering into the water, she saw the brutal truth. The fool had pushed too hard, overextended his power, and died right there. What absolute trash, she hissed, placing a tiny barrier on his advance, but the shockwave alone crushed him, leaving him groaning. She had no choice but to sew his broken heart back together. Though suddenly we're thrown back to the first week of senior year, where G had just surged into the top 10 on the rankings, his name glowing for all to admire. He shouted how his insane stats and pure body training made him elite, letting his ego soar even higher than the true top players. The class clown was suddenly no longer dead. But a total nobody named Hei was at rock bottom, instantly seen as fresh meat by G, who practically drooled at the chance to give this clueless transfer student a brutal reality check. Snapping back to reality, G glared at the board, where his score had miraculously jumped up 10 spots since the last trial. Hey now, a nervous lackey announced the gym trials had begun while a terrified student shivered in the arena under intense pressure. A brutal slap from his hand smashed his face, sending blood flying everywhere. The force was so terrible it broke his body and snapped his neck. The instructor screamed for medics, hoping Dr. Song's famous healing could pull the kid back from the dead, while he turned to a green-haired guy who was totally confused by this deadly test, and whispered that it was about raw strength and surviving blunt hits, noting that this bloodbath was Jubai's perfect playground because his steel-like defense was unbreakable for anyone in their grade. So Jubai stepped up to challenge this year's Palm Strike King, Zhao Yukai, with a hunger for total victory. Yukai locked onto him and swung his forged steel palm to smash that huge ego. The blast shockwave tore the arena apart and buried them under a mountain of rubble. Yukai sneered, mocking G's legendary defense as nothing but garbage. But when the smoke faded, his jaw dropped as G stood perfectly unharmed, laughing cruelly at his pathetic attack. With a single brutal move, G knocked his opponent down, and the instructor immediately rushed him to the emergency ward. But while the next challenge, Wu, was about to begin, G demanded Hei's head on a platter, leaving Hei utterly confused by the advanced cultivation laws his classmate was desperately trying to explain in basic terms, which made it clear that even a mortal high school like Municipal No. 3 was an anomaly for having survived this long. The green-haired man calmly explained that open-source moves belong to everyone and can be used freely, but patented skills are locked down by a scary immortal cultivation bureau, where only the Supreme Lords and their VIP guests can practice them, meaning anyone who steals a patented move will face brutal prison or even death. For instance, forged steel palms are open to anyone, but the rare 100 or refined steel is locked behind a deadly wall that ordinary people can never break, making the path to mastery so dangerous that few survive the climb. The instructor recited simple spells to fix the broken arena, then called Hei to meet his end. The two rivals locked gazes, and G's heart hammered with wild rage, wondering why a mere nobody could provoke such fury over just one lost rank, knowing that crushing him would finally restore his supreme honor. Sizzly, he casually suggested they hit each other at the same time, which was just the rudest thing imaginable. G roared at the arrogant bug, but Hei didn't even flinch. He calmly shaped his basic steel palm attack. He rolled his eyes at this terrible open-source mess and fired back with his ultimate superweapon, a blade forged from 100 refined steels. The instructor held his breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Met skin with a thunderous crash, but Jubai was surprisingly knocked back like a ragdoll. He smashed straight through the concrete wall, leaving a huge hole where he had been, and the whole crowd stood frozen in silence while everyone's jaw dropped. The instructor saw that Hei had truly started with the basic free-to-play palm, but at the moment of deadly impact, he smoothly stacked his patented 100 refined steel right on top. The Jiang family's art is so deadly hard to master that this crazy kid didn't seem to fear the total disaster of stealing it, especially after Hei calmly told the teacher to call a medic because the arrogant bully was stuck in the wall like cement, leaving everyone staring in horror and confusion. Turning around, the once proud instructor shrank into a scared ball and begged to know who taught him such powerful skills. He motioned him near and breathed out a freezing secret about the Dragon Lord, while G suddenly jolted awake in the school clinic. His blood boiled with pure rage until a voice beside him whispered that this dangerous man looked strangely familiar. Jian stared at a picture of Hei, his eyes tightening as he saw the same haunted face from his past, and G shouted for answers. G gave a mysterious nod while his mind raced with dark thoughts, since he was certain the rival was dead, but he shook it off to prepare for the chemistry trials, where G explained that the exam would involve crafting deadly poisons and testing raw toxins. Yuxian's evil grin spread wide, signaling that total chaos was coming. The scene shifts to a dirty, rusted car junkyard. He trained his fake steel hand until he became the absolute best at it. After smashing every wrecked car into pieces to earn a huge cash bonus, Hei realized he could skip buying a crusher to save money, but suddenly a system alert demanded he finish his steel mastery immediately. So after nailing every single strike without taking a hit, he began wondering who could be his personal punching bag for the rest of the night. Just as a shadow stepped forward, aggressively asking if I was Hei. He flatly denied it, playing dumb by pretending the other guy was stalking the wrong person and introducing himself as Yinjian instead. Far away, the embarrassed teacher sneezed hard and shivered in confusion, wondering why he felt so cold while trying to fix a dull slideshow. Back in the yard, the stranger yelled at Hei to stop his fake act. Then young Master Jiang sent him off to give the stranger a beating, revealing Jiang Xuan to be a terrifying cultivator from the 9th tier of spiritual attraction. Hei casually strolled forward, sighing that he should have dropped names sooner, but he only lied because he expected some annoying debt collector, and now the game was on. Zixan frowned, totally baffled by this kid's zero-fear attitude, especially facing a wildly superior cultivation rank, and scanning his aura, he saw this rookie barely scrape the entry level of the spiritual attraction realm, wondering if this punk was actually masking his true power. Trashing all logic, Zixan launched a blinding assault, and a devastating right hook sent Hei rocketing across the junkyard. Zixan blitzed forward, convinced the kid's earlier confidence was total cap, and one strike was all it took. But midair, a chilling realization froze Zixan's blood as Hei was glaring straight back at him, coldly provoking Zixan to hit harder, and shockwaves shattered the terrain as they clashed. After taking another heavy hit and a brutal kick that sent him face first into the dirt, Hei still wore a wild, crazy grin across his bruised face. Xuan was terrified as his body crumbled and his power faded, but his scary grin stayed the same until he unleashed a final deadly move that smashed Hei's ribs, sent him flying like a rag doll, and stopped his fall by trapping him under a huge rock. Xuan laughed at the modern high schoolers, calling them tragically weak despite their huge egos, but Hei stood still while his flesh healed itself with crazy speed, leaving Xuan gasping in shock because this power was far beyond even the best healers, and felt like a godly gift from the realm itself. He let loose his very last blow, which exploded like a tornado tearing straight through the clearing. Emi's terrifying grin grew wider as his system flashed, confirming that he had absorbed all damage and landed every single hit, finally completing his 100 refined steel training. His eyes flared to life and instantly snapped onto Zwan's ankle. Bam! He slammed the black underworld palm thunder straight into his attacker's gut. Zixuan easily swatted the spell away with his bare hands, laughing at how weak the rookie's magic was, while Hei just smirked and whispered for him to grab it tight, instantly pouring raw energy into his free hand with a loud boom. With his steel palm activated and supercharged by the 100 refined technique, Zixuan took the crushing blow head-on and shot backward like a rocket, smashing a huge oak tree in half when he hit it. He skidded through the dirt, desperately trying to steady himself as he coughed up dark blood, and pure panic seized him. His core meridians were smashed to pieces, his internal network was ruined, yet a scared high school student had to switch into desperate healing mode, so he vowed bloody revenge until a terrifying light locked its gaze onto him. That crackling thunder orb was fused right into his skin. Panic seized him as he frantically shook his arm, but it stayed still until time froze before a blinding explosion, leaving only his charred sunglasses behind until he smoothly slid them over his eyes, triggered a system chime confirming the elite kill, and claimed his new epic magical artifact, the dynamic Manhwa, which massively boosted his vision to lock onto super-fast targets with ease, making him grin in excitement over this insane mid-boss drop. The morning sun rose as the new leaderboards appeared. He ground his teeth in rage while Hei zoomed past everyone, already holding the top spot in the 18th rank. But this terrifying foe had already crushed his hired thugs before a strange woman shouted for his secret leveling trick, offering only cheap healing pills that made the listening girls in the classroom drag him away, accusing him of trying to scam them with a terrible deal. Before long, the bell rang to summon the class to Mr. Qing Yan's chemistry lab, where today's brutal test would put them through a deadly showcase of crafting and spotting poisons, a necessary skill for their future high-stakes careers filled with guaranteed backstabbing from rivals and bosses. If they wanted to make it through their shifts, they had to pass this test as if their lives depended on it. Every student got a tray of spooky samples and had to quickly swallow the safe ones while dodging the deadly traps, with their survival and grades depending on how fast they could spot the poison and name it right for extra points. Meanwhile, Shibai and his brother had completely tricked Hei's tray, planning to cancel his graduation forever and making today his funeral. By mixing the smell of fish, mint dumplings, stinky tofu, durian, and fermented bean juice, Shibai made it so he couldn't sniff out the deadly poison hidden inside, even though the heavy-set guy was dripping chemicals on the food while the green-haired student breathed it all in to find the scent. One girl channeled lightning to zap the toxins. Teacher Chingen gave an impressed nod to her sharp instincts, but then saw Hei just standing frozen while everyone else moved fast, causing Shibai to laugh from the shadows as he assumed she was too scared to eat, only to watch her casually grab a loaded tray and head toward the floating island, where the divine dragon was lazily fishing, bored by her godly eternity of just casting lines, until suddenly thick dark blood began gushing from her divine eyes and nose in the middle of a yawn. Flashback 5 minutes ago, Hei had ruthlessly devoured his entire tray, leaving Teacher Chingen completely shaken as she screamed about his death wish, only to remind him that she'd always prepared for reckless idiots like him by strictly nerfing the dosages so he'd suffer agonizing cramps instead of death. When she heard this, she grinned with dark delight, realizing her safety was just a lie because he had poisoned every bite enough to kill 5 grown men, and instantly, the Hei turned ghostly pale. Black blood sprayed from his face before he fell limp, and Teacher Chingen grabbed his wrist to declare him dead, only for the classroom to erupt in panic while another student scoffed that Hei was nobody important, just another routine casualty for a senior like the rank 19 guy who smiled at the chance to climb the leaderboards, leaving Teacher Chingen furious and scared about her promotion review while her mind blamed the toxic PE teacher she'd been fighting all semester, until suddenly Hei sat straight up. She jumped back in shock to see him breathing, realizing for the first time in her teaching career that a student could fake out a master by listing 5 deadly poisons, including a rare one, as glowing text appeared on his hand to reveal his ultimate trump card. She felt his soul fade as he sweated bullets, realizing the elite sect assassin he hired was nothing but trash because his background check showed pathetic stats, leaving her to wonder how such an ordinary person survived a deadly strike until midnight in the lab where Teacher Chingen, focused intensely on a swirling liquid, confirmed his insane poison was real, and only a legendary master could create it, proving he was a true anomaly. While deep in the newly opened Immortal bookstore, Hei frantically searched ancient texts, utterly amazed by the strange magic of texting palms. The divine dragon literally texted his hand while casually dropping the lore that this was their insanely overpowered forbidden bloodline link, then called him an absolute idiot for lacking basic common sense. She wove their spirits together to build a direct mental line that could save their lives or seal their fates in an instant. Gritting his teeth, he complained that the soul link burned so badly he begged the gods to find an easier way to talk to humans, since he truly thought they could just wander around freely. Rolling her eyes, she bluntly reminded him that to humans, immortals were like walking nuclear bombs since the palace watched every breath of theirs, and since she'd already broken the rules by visiting them once, asking for more would trigger massive alarms that would send a whole squad of divine executioners hunting her down, yet he just smirked and shamelessly asked if she could drop some coordinates for god-tier loot. She completely shut him down because the perks he needed were already built into his skills, leaving him with nothing left to do but read the damn manual. Suddenly, crimson blood dripped from his hand, freezing a nearby bookstore clerk in shock as she realized the sheer panic of scrubbing floors again. But when he quickly apologized and asked for study materials, she was still stunned to hear this high school senior aiming for the condensation realm a year before the entrance exam, which guaranteed an elite academy spot and made her sigh at his sky-high ego. Despite giving him the best books in the store, he threw it hard onto the checkout counter. He totally ignored her careful beginner tips, so she just rolled her eyes at how arrogant he was. He scanned the pages so fast his eyes were jumping everywhere like a hummingbird's wings. The clerk couldn't believe her eyes as the kid mindlessly flipped straight to the end of the master manual, proving she was right to think he was a lost cause because trying to run before he could crawl was a guaranteed disaster that required maxing out his spirit or body to level 10 and eating a super rare pill, a brutal and lethal gamble where violent energy would tear him apart from the inside out, demanding expensive healing potions to survive since one wrong move meant instant death. He ignored the warnings and sneaked off to grab just one pill. While outside, the loud, angry screams of the Zhang family shook the fancy mansion. He rained down his full fury on a poison master, leaving the terrified assassin sweating bullets as he begged for a second chance, only for Ji to snap back that his own rank had dropped to 10th, and he'd give the assassin exactly 1 week to kill the target or else die himself. Cold metal tore through the ceiling, and just minutes before, the Zhang mansion had been locked down tighter than a fortress, while a terrified guard on the second floor watched his partner die, only to have his own silence forced by a deadly blow before he could even scream for help. Suddenly, a dark shape leaped perfectly onto the balcony up above. He took out the snipers on the roof faster than anyone could blink. Looking down, he heard Ji giving orders to kill him. Pure explosive energy surged into his fist, and with one devastating punch, he smashed through the floor, plummeted 2 stories straight down, and landed right in front of a horrified Ji. His sword flashed and stuck right into the rich kid's shoulder. That arrogant young master had just woken up a sleeping dragon, thinking he was only scaring a helpless new kid, but now the Grim Reaper was at his door with an icy blade hovering just inches from his beating heart. Even though he was bleeding out, the cornered bully kept fighting back with all he had. Jabai drove his hand forward with all his might, knocking the intruder away with a sharp, powerful strike. The invader reacted with lightning speed, yanking out his sword to meet Ji's palm blast with a force so great that Ji was blasted straight through several concrete walls and left buried in the rubble. Just as a deadly burst of poisoned arrows hissed toward him, he spun around and used his singing blade to send them all back harmlessly. But suddenly, a surprise attacker charged in with a wild weapon, a heavy staff topped with a metal lotus that snapped open and closed like a giant jaw, sending sparks flying as his sword blocked the heavy blow. With a wicked click, a spring-loaded dagger fired from the staff, aiming right for his eye, but his head tilted just a millimeter so the deadly tip only barely grazed his cheek. The assassin had to run away in panic because he missed his deadly strike, and the master of poison stared in shock at the high schooler. Blood ran down Hai's face, but his eyes stayed fixed on his target with a scary dead look that made the poison master shake. Suddenly, Hai disappeared and rushed forward to slash at Ji's throat. Ji managed to barely dodge the deadly blow. He swung his blade for a big cut, but a sudden gust of wind stopped him right in his tracks. Toxic needles shot out from the shadows, and the poison master was furious. How dare this brat completely disrespect his deadly presence? Frustration boiled inside the assassin. With venom that toxic, this arrogant kid should be a rotting corpse by now. But the absolute madman stood his ground, crushed a mystical artifact in his hand, and the poison master ordered Ji to run as he unleashed a blinding storm of needles to hide them. Hai narrowed his eyes as Ji smashed the window and leaped to safety, only for the venom experts to smirk and unleash a terrifying aura that turned the air into a choking green fog far deadlier than any previous dart, quickly rotting his skin until his body hit the ground. As the master laughed wildly at the broken boy, he thought he had won, only to realize his deadly attack had just split a simple clay statue in two. His terrifying eyes snapped open as a blinding flash of a sword sliced through the poison master, making him wish he had never been born. Since the divine dragon started using her clay avatar trick to dodge bloodshed, she's been walking away from every deadly fight dry, but losing 2 avatars at once set off huge alarms that Hai had walked right into a fatal trap. She peeked into the room to see a legendary master brutally cutting down an enemy, only to find the great warrior fading away with no pulse after losing so much blood, while the young novice calmly took all the loot from the dead body to sell for extra money. In the middle of nowhere, Ji fell hard onto the empty mountain path, his lungs burning like fire. He was completely drained after his desperate, shameful escape, so he left his phone behind and frantically waved down a passing car, begging for a chance to make a call. Pure, unadulterated rage swelled inside him as he seethed that a nobody dared to hit back at the mighty Zhang family, so he vowed to summon elite killers to wipe out the boy's entire bloodline. But to our shock, a cold voice suddenly cut in, with Hai standing right there laughing and asking who needed to die. Hai's blade swung down, but Jubai dodged it just in time. She frantically slammed his 100 refined steel technique into his skin to make it as hard as rock, but even that couldn't stop a deep bloody cut from slashing his arm as he desperately jumped backward. Before he could even stand steady, a huge fireball slammed into his face and blew him right off the sharp cliff. He crashed into the hard ground with a force that felt like his bones were breaking. Down he dropped, ready to be killed, while Ji stood frozen and whined about his famous family's name. Unbothered, Hai coldly swung his blade and sent the arrogant fool's head flying. Hai smirked, realizing that without the Dragon King taking that deadly blow earlier, this trash would have killed him over and over, and it left him completely baffled that even now, facing the Grim Reaper, Ji was still desperately bragging about his boring family name. The fire burned the body to ash, but he knew the angry Jiang clan would still blame him for the murder, so with their secret fighting style still in his hands, a huge bloody war was now unavoidable. Despite the chaos, a wicked grin spread across his face as the flawless payback landed him with an incredible loot jackpot, including 3 ultra-rare condensation pills that even his own brother could only get by sacrificing everything to the Dragon King, while he also grabbed mountains of gold, ancient talismans, shiny silver, and weapons, only for the system to instantly read his greedy thought and spawn a creepy holographic merchant interface that aggressively pushed shady deals before flashing a tempting digital roulette wheel filled with legendary treasures right in front of him. He smashed the sell button and watched his chaotic pile of junk turn into a massive sum of money, only for the shop to suddenly glow and demand $1 million for a legendary sword right when he was furious, making him realize this greedy system was trying to steal everything for a fake item that would cost nothing in the real world. Sure, he had the cash, but getting scammed wasn't his style, so he rolled his eyes and quickly swiped to a different category. He found an indestructible pair of cargo pants with infinite pockets for 50,000, then spent another 100,000 on a relic that deals more damage the closer you are to dying, followed by 50,000 for slow-motion eyesight, 100,000 for an unbreakable shirt, and 200,000 for gravity-defying shoes, leaving him crying over his tiny remaining balance while the dragon laughed. That weakling dared to mark her with a blood curse, so she would make his life a living hell. Out of nowhere, a servant spoke up to the mighty Dragon King. A cat stepped out of the dark shadows to say it had finally found the way to break the magic spell on the humans. As the kitty slid toward the old altar, she realized the boy's family was so weak they could only control trash monsters who got wiped out instantly, leaving her baffled as an all-powerful dragon queen asked how a nobody like him could possibly infect her. The furry sidekick guessed that the Celestial Emperor's harsh seals had ruined her base stats while she fell to the lower realms, while the kid's desperate need to survive had forced his hex level straight to the very top. Luckily, the tether is stuck to his own trash stats, meaning a spirit scrub can only steal a tiny sliver of her huge health pool, and once that little bit is gone, it's game over for him. The magic circle woke up and pushed her straight into the center, where glowing runes appeared above her head just as a terrible tearing scream ripped from her throat as the dark energy surged outward. Back on Earth, there was only the purest silence. Hai slept soundly, unaware as the crimson tether slipped inside him. Her glowing eyes fixed on the curse, pouring her power into a blade of light. She swung down to cut the connection, but a loud knock broke her focus as an envoy delivered a summons from the heavenly minister. Leaving her cat confused, they ditched magic tokens for a visit that instantly sparked the divine dragon's trap alarm. Standing before the empty throne where the ruler had been away for centuries, she smirked at the shadowy figure offering the seat, snapped to cut the nonsense and demand the real reason, only to learn her long-awaited promotion to high immortal status was completely denied. Her eyes burned with pure fury after she gave up her huge kingdom and loyal army to serve a prideful court, honoring a blood oath that promised her the top title after just 100 years of service. He tried to blame the system for the chaotic rush of weak gods begging for power, warned that breaking the rules for her VIP pass would cause a heavenly riot, and told her to grind karma to level up, only for her to vanish right before he could finish his smug speech. Her familiar vanished and instantly reappeared, tearing through the clouds at godlike speeds with a face twisted in pure rage, while the kitty braced for impact as she crashed down from the peak like a falling meteor. The shockwaves tore through the trees, flattening the whole forest in an instant. Her poor pet face planted into the hard stone, trembling as she asked if her mind was still working. Sprawled in the broken crater, she flashed a crazy grin and hissed, "I'm fantastic," even feeling a bit trapped after literally blowing up a mountain, so now that her own power was capped, she had to make her human shield work even harder. while a nearby bird chirped in annoyance at being woken up. High deep in the mortal woods, finally completed his breathing technique, making his foundation unbreakable and instantly triggering his next level of power with a satisfying boom. Condensation realm energy exploded with a violent surge, shooting a massive aura into the sky while thick dust choked the air around them. As the light faded and his eyes glowed with a scary red light, his strength, health, and skills surged to new heights, unlocking powerful new moves, legendary items, and rare treasures, though the system's new demands for rare pills and herbs, plus a terrifying side quest to survive a secret realm, while bleeding out with heavy penalties for failure and a total lack of clues on where the demon cave was hidden, turned this easy win into a dangerous gamble. Right before Q, a red magic circle sparked under his feet, sending panic crashing into his chest as a 20-minute countdown began, and he cursed the deadly spikes he had to dodge. He poured every bit of his life force into his arms and desperately scraped himself along the wall, skidding to a halt, just a hair's breadth away from being skewered. That heart-stoppingly close call nearly ended his run, and though a beefier health bar wouldn't erase the pain, the looming curse of random hemorrhages made dodging every single scratch his only hope. But metal arm suddenly shot out and flew straight for his face. He quickly ducked to miss a deadly spike, but just barely avoided getting hit by another one. With his raw speed, strength, and reflexes already at their absolute limit, he channeled his overflowing magic power instead of needing a rare blade to slice through stone, effortlessly cleaving a giant stone arm in one strike to show just how powerful mastering the basics can make you. He scrambled frantically up the walls like a terrified insect, zigzagging desperately away from the brutal assault in this hellish pit. A giant hand slammed shut on the exit, trapping him, but he fought back with a dark punch and a thunderous strike that destroyed everything around him. With only 17 minutes and 36 seconds left on the clock, the ground suddenly exploded to reveal a giant rock monster, and a whole squad of stone warriors wielding huge hammers rushed in just as a deadly bleeding curse hit them, making the situation spin out of control. With a stone soldier smashing down in agony, a giant hand calmly blocked the heavy hammer blow right where he had just summoned his prepaid stone golem. His severe blood loss instantly made his blood boil, massively boosting his attack damage. He quickly slashed the stone guard with his dagger. Then the system forced him to finish his golem training by landing the right combo hits, but right now he had zero progress toward his goal of 5. He let out a giant golem hand that smashed the rushing rocky grunts into dust, then punched the rest away as the massive hand stood tall in victory, while Zikian violently slapped a chained girl to wake her up. She gasped for air as she realized she was stuck right in front of a terrifyingly dark altar. Her final memory was taking a sip of soda before she froze in panic and begged her boss, Zikian, to explain what was going on. Zikian glared in frustration as his condensation pill investment failed, and the sacred dragon ignored his offering, so driven by greed he chose to worship a darker deity to get another pill, which caused his dark-haired subordinate to freak out instantly because she realized she was the actual human sacrifice earning a pathetic 30,000 won a month for hard labor, and now he wanted to steal her life too, while she screamed that her contract's absolute zero clauses demanded a literal death sacrifice. But Zikian coldly stated that GT1 held zero liability since she signed through a shady dispatch agency. With a cold blade at her throat, he forced her to stay silent while she cried for her life, until a huge explosion rocked the room and our hero burst in with a wooden staff, stared down the manager, declared that his staff were family, flipped him off, and had just crushed the stone golem trials. Jian froze in shock as the man he just survived turned the tables, smirking that Jian's brother must have told him where to find the hidden base and how to break the guards, which made Jian realize with horror that the stranger actually killed his own brother, and so Jian's greed took over as he lunged forward to violently snatch the fallen brother's pill from him. He didn't care at all about his siblings' final moments. He only pushed him against Hei to save their twisted family honor. With his brother gone, he greedily took everything, but a sudden, blinding counterattack stopped his charge dead and left his arm shattered in a horrifying flash as he skidded toward the forbidden altar. As Crimson dragged the ancient stone and woke the sealed beast, a suffocating evil filled the room, leaving just 9 minutes and 20 seconds before Hei slashed the chains to free the captives. Recognition sparked in her eyes as she remembered how he had once ignored everyone in the guild, leaving her stunned by his sudden power as she shouted for the stone titan to drag her to safety. As giant rocks lifted her up, the dark altar happily ate Gon's fading body, while a pair of scary eyes opened in the shadows. A skeletal hand grabbed a cursed sword, and a glowing red figure stepped out of nothingness to unleash a dangerous final blow. He stared straight into the nightmare's eyes, and his quick glance at her stats froze as her overwhelming dark energy caused the world to glitch. She breathed so hard it blew his tiny blood vessels apart, and when he tried to sense her power, his mind got smashed and the dark gate behind her slammed shut, leaving him to realize he just walked into a deadly trap before the red demon instantly charged him. He barely managed to throw up his dagger to block the blow, but the crushing force slammed him to his knees instantly, while the dark blade viciously sliced across his shoulder. Before he could even blink, she swept her leg around to kick him with such force that a giant shockwave slammed into his guard, blasting him like a ragdoll straight into the cave wall, leaving him coughing blood while she casually reset her stance, only for a sudden flash of silver to slice through his flesh, just as his golem tried to summon. While up on the floating island above, 3 clay guardians exploded in a burst of light that made the great dragon tremble in fear. It was a clear sign that everything would be completely destroyed. Down below, Hay was stunned to take a fatal hit before he could even see the blade move, collapsing heavily into the dirt as the Crimson Warrior calmly closed her eyes, channeled deadly violet mana into her fingertips, and swung her cursed blade straight for his throat. But he miraculously caught the blow with his trusted dagger. Into the world battle sent a hurricane force wave of air crashing through the cavern. He knew this monster was built to never stop chaining together powerful attacks. With a frantic snap of his wrist, the giant's fist burst into existence, but she flipped backward through the air and landed far away to stay safe. Her bright eyes went wide as Hay hammered her with a wild dagger rush, but suddenly a red warning flashed across his vision, screaming that his special boiling blood power was igniting to take 99% of the damage meant for her. Adrenaline rushed through his veins as he faced her in an epic battle, finally realizing her deadly one-hit kill was actually a trick, which explained why his guards were broken so easily, so he charged with wild dagger strikes that she simply swatted away with a graceful sword swing before landing a final thunderous hit. He threw a fake ball that sparked against her sword, causing a huge blast that made her immediately use her strongest move. He completely lured her into the trap, counting on that very trick, and the system's chime confirmed that the enemy's deadly power had been fully paid for. She unleashed a power that wiped out the sky, and when their deadly energy clashed in the air, a blinding shockwave exploded and broke the battlefield apart. As the dust cleared, both warriors stood tall, but a heartbeat later, the fierce swordswoman crumbled to her knees. Our guy came through with not a single scratch on him. She stood stunned in disbelief because her deadly first strike did nothing, while he smirked and mocked her panic, only for her to finally speak up and reveal that he had wrongly assumed she was silent, and he coldly reminded her that 2 can play at that deadly game. Though he originally planned to survive her final blow, his stats just couldn't handle the insane damage, which demanded a much higher cultivation level, and then it clicked for her that during their last battle, she had tricked him into defending his throat against a brutal follow-up slash, so he had heavily fortified against that specific attack, and even sneakily copied her exact slashing technique as a bonus. Her eyes burned with rage, but a bright spell circle suddenly popped in the way. A system warning flashed as he rushed to finish his prepaid jutsu seals, because if he failed, absolute divine retribution would strike, marking his terrifying first encounter with the backlash of abusing cosmic laws, while both fighters moved their hands fast until panic filled her eyes as her mystic gestures violently refused to form. A scary ghost hand burst from the ground to pin her arms down, but she fought hard to stop her spell from failing, knowing she just needed to waste time while breaking free with a mighty burst. She tried desperately to set up her seals, but it was too late as a blinding storm crashed down on her. A heavenly disaster struck and wiped out the whole area, but he stood safe while a system alert confirmed that his payment was taken to instantly boost his power into a new realm, leaving the dazed swordswoman to crawl out of the smoking crater. He stopped her from running, and whispered that she was still alive, while she looked down and quietly gave up. She told him to kill or skin her without a second thought, her fearless and icy calm making her look nothing like the pathetic enemies who always begged for mercy. So when he raised his dagger for the final strike and she squeezed her eyes shut to accept her fate, the blow never came and she gasped as miraculous energy healed her wounds instantly. With a smug grin, he announced that they only had a single health bar between them. He bravely asked her to rise together, sealing a deadly blood curse on the fierce warrior Long Yin that means any hurt she feels will instantly hurt the Dragon King. The scene shifts to a fancy bath where a fluffy cat was sleeping soundly until the water suddenly frothed into boiling bubbles as a majestic divine dragon stood up, sending a huge splash that woke the terrified feline, who immediately demanded answers while the dragon frowned at the strange feeling that something evil like a parasitic vampire had latched onto her, right as the system announced that his broken payment ability had leveled up, allowing him to prepay for top-tier magical artifacts and rare healing elixirs, though he still couldn't use items that were too strong for his current cultivation level. And the next morning at the academy, Long Yin walked in wearing a dangerously skimpy outfit. He slowly turned to reveal himself, leaving Fatty and the green-haired guy staring in awe, with Fatty drooling as he desperately tried to figure out who this mysterious new beauty was. The green-haired bro totally roasted him for crushing on his supposed sister-in-law, leaving Fatty pale as he swore his heart belonged only to Teacher Ju. Our hero pretended to be clueless and asked if they had ever met before. She rolled her eyes in a sarcastic way, bringing up the bloody mess they'd made just a few days ago. She boldly whispered that they literally share the exact same health bar, a crazy detail that finally made him remember. Her new hairstyle confused him so much he had to ask how she tricked the strict school rules to join his class, leading her to smirk as she revealed the secret. 2 days ago, the greedy principal took gold bars to instantly admit a new student, and now that the easy quizzes are done, the brutal mock exams have begun, forcing these kids who spent 10 years studying to face their very first real fight. So the moment had finally arrived for them to reveal their hidden strength and prove they were truly ready, and he gave a sharp order for every student to rush to the huge exam arena, starting with the first grade 12 class. Next, Class 2 started the roll call with nervous jitters, while Class 3 proudly reported perfect attendance, followed immediately by the loud announcements from Class 4. While Yin found the brutal exam thrilling, the green-haired boy sweated bullets, terrified his squad would embarrass themselves, until he stood before the entire grade promising everything would be fine, only to reveal that he was shameless and immune to embarrassment. Then the proctor just tossed the rules aside. Each class fights in its own sealed arena where every warrior battles the same beast to earn a perfect score by crushing their target in 5 minutes or face defeat. Your final score hangs on the raw damage you deal, but if a deadly emergency strikes, Instructor Joe will leap from center stage to handle it as your ultimate trial begins. The students were so nervous they couldn't walk into the arena, but first up were Xiao Jiang and Guan Lang from Class 1, Grade 12. Tang Long from Class 2 and Ryugasaki Hanako from Class 4 joined the group, and while he whispered about mysterious Yin sect members, the green-haired guy explained they were just there for a school assignment thanks to a new peace treaty, which shocked him since he thought only regular schools let those cultists hang out until Hanako suddenly sensed the hidden danger nearby. Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd, her killer instinct clearly on full display, while Yin scowled in fury at this stranger daring to glare at her master, a move reserved only for her own little brother, leaving the green-haired guy sweating and completely speechless at their crazy family dynamic. And as the battle started, and the trial beast appeared, a huge dark portal tore open right in the middle of the stage. A huge eye peeked out, showing a scary mushroom monster hiding behind it. And Instructor Jian instantly felt the suffocating, evil vibe of the beast and panicked, realizing it was the legendary Cloud Canopy Demon Lord once sealed by the Taiyong sect, while Tao mocked him for being too soft to drop such a terrifying creature for a simple mock trial, explaining that even though the heavy suppression stones and clones made it safe, the real demon would have destroyed them all, but the rookie kid was sobbing after his fire talismans were useless against the mutant before time ran out. Another challenger threw a wild storm of rocks at the beast but got hit hard right back with a powerful punch. Sure, the guy landed a solid hit, but the monster violently yanked him out of bounds for instant failure. The first round was so brutally hard that almost no one scored above 70 points, leaving only a few lucky survivors while the crowd desperately tried to figure out which cruel instructor had designed this nightmare. The green hair and a sigh of relief that he wasn't the only one looking foolish while everyone else failed. Tao's jaw dropped as all of a sudden he noticed something moving in the arena. Hanako ran full speed away from the monster, heading straight for the wall with no way through. He gasped in shock, thinking she was about to quit in anger, but just as she reached her limit, she leaped forward instead of giving up. Instead, she kicked her shield away, using the explosive bounce to power up her final attack just as the mutant lunged forward for a deadly punch. Flash. Her blade slipped free and sliced the giant beast into tiny pieces, leaving Instructor Jian frozen in shock as the stadium went wild over her perfect score while everyone else failed. Toxic mushrooms were already bursting up through the broken concrete on the battlefield, pointing straight to a much worse nightmare hiding beneath the ground. Next up was the green-haired king of Class 1, Li Junhao, who didn't care about his top rank or the teacher's strange hand waves, because all he wanted was to bag those magical artifacts for a quick win. As the screaming fans cheered him on, cocky Juna got ready to crush the exam monsters, eager to show off his unmatched raw power and prove he's the best even among the top students. Mr. Black Fog poured out of the mushroom beast, leaving Teacher Tao confused about who made this nightmare, while Junhao smirked, sure he could still crush the mutated monster, and then glowing runes burst across his fists as he attacked. The crushing blow sent the hulking creature rocketing across the arena. Teacher Jian gasped at the sheer impact. Tao revealed that Junhao literally tattooed